All right, guys. So here we are, all working from home, sequestered. I hope you're making the best of it, shall we say. This week, we're talking about organizing information, and we're going to be talking about outlining and concept mapping. There are two different ways of doing the same thing, which is to show how the main idea is supported by the subsequent ideas, the supporting details. And if you think of this in your chapter, this will help us actually produce our outline. You got your major heading, and then underneath those are the minor headings that explain and support the major heading, right? So in an outline, we're going to show that those minor headings support the major heading by indenting. You indent to show that an idea is covered by the bigger idea. You've done this before. I know, like when you write papers, sometimes your teachers make you do this, or maybe you've had to do it, in a reading for a class. But you got your main idea, and then you indent to show that these are the points of support. So the idea is that you indent to show that, I think of it like an umbrella. You can use any metaphor you like, where this umbrella is wide enough because it goes all the way out here, right? It's wide enough to cover these guys that are underneath it. Whatever, not a great metaphor. Like I said, you make up your own. And sometimes, even these points of support, the author has more to say about them. They elaborate on those. So you might have to indent again to say, well, in support of support number 2, the author also said this, and this other thing. But then they were moving on to a whole different idea. So we're able to sort of show in this way that all of these ideas are part of what explains, support, and develop this main idea. When we get down to Roman numeral 2, back it out here, sort of in line with that 1, to show that this is a new main idea. And how it's supported in the chapter, we work the same way. I know this probably isn't new to you, but when it comes to doing these assignments at home or whatever, you want to make sure that your A's and B's are indented to show that they are covered by this idea. If they're all lined up here, it doesn't help show how the ideas fit together. And this is an organizing strategy. This is about taking the information the author has given us and organizing it in a way that we can make sense of it later. So I'm going to give you a quick example from chapter 9. As I look here, I see that your major headings are chapter 9, of course, dynamics of interpersonal relationships. Your main heading, the first one, is why we form relationships. And I see that there are, in my book anyway, 7 subheadings under that. So my guess is, as I'm going through this outline, my Roman numeral 1 here is going to be why we form relationships, and my A, B, C's, and D's are going to go on through appearance, similarity, complementarity, and so forth. In my book, this is on page 259. I think we have the same edition. So I'll give you a quick example of how this works. The poorly named eraser. Yikes. All right. Why we form relationships? Why do we have the relationships with the people that we do? I don't know, but I can read and find out apparently starting on page 260. My first major heading, appearance. If I were a predicting man, I might make a prediction. I might ask the question, how does appearance influence why we form relationships? And my predicted answer would be, we like to have relationships with people that we think are good looking. All right, so I'm moving over here on page 260. As I read through this section on appearance, it begins with, most people claim we should judge others on the basis of how they act, not how they look, but we often do the opposite. For instance, physical appearance seems to be the primary basis for attraction for speed daters. So, appearance is the idea. The ideas that support how appearance affects why we form relationships, we'll list underneath it, indenting to show that it's covered by this notion of appearance. And so basically what we have is primary basis of attraction among speed daters. What else do we have here? Online profiles, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, first impressions can influence other ones. So this is a first impression situation. How does appearance influence why we form relationships? Well, appearance is a first impression. And I know you already remember about first impressions, halo effect, horn effect, that other stuff you've been reading about. And so moving on here, even if your appearance isn't beautiful by societal standards, stop it, you're all gorgeous. Consider these facts. First, after initial impressions have passed, ordinary looking people with pleasing personalities are likely to be judged as attractive. So, you may not be, a Brandon Knight kind of George Clooney looking fella, but if you're reasonably nice, over time, people are going to say you look better. So let's see. First impressions fade. How do we want to say this? First impressions fade. People with pleasing personalities are judged as attractive. And I'm not sure if there's anything else we really want to put in here. Yeah, physical factors become less important as a relationship progresses. So what we have here is appearance is important early on, right? And part of the details of that is to explain that it's less important later. Physical factors become less important as a relationship progresses. Physical attractiveness, less important. So now that we've squeezed all the details we can out of this notion of how appearance affects why we form relationships, we're moving on to the next one, similarity. So where do we put similarity? Is similarity an idea that explains appearance? It is not. It is its own idea. It is, in fact, its own minor heading here. So similarity. My hunch is this is going to say something. I guess my question would be, how does similarity affect why we form relationships? And of course, the answer is going to be something like, we like to have relationships with people who are similar to us. I don't have any idea if that's true, but I assume that that's what they're going to say. Reading through here, we've got similarity plays an important role in initial attraction. So it's important first. The initial attraction, when you think people are like you, you're more likely to be attracted to them. Let's see. Why is similarity a strong foundation? According to the second paragraph here. So this is sort of a different point. This isn't explaining just why similarity is important in forming relationships. It's kind of getting into this idea, well, I guess it is why, of why it's important at first. And so I'm going to go ahead and indent. If you want to call this number 2, 3, and 4, you're not far off, so that's fine. There are several reasons why similarity is a strong foundation for relationships. That's a clue, right? There are several reasons, tells us, I'm about to give you several reasons. And those reasons are going to explain it, right? So why is it important at first? Well, number one, it's validating. If you're like me, and I like you, well, then I must be a likable person too. So it validates who I am. The second, similarity makes others more predictable. Like, let's face it, if you're like me, I kind of know me, and so I can kind of guess where you're going with everything, because, it's basically where I would be going, I guess. So what we hear is predictable. And of course, I'm getting this from these first, second, third. There are several reasons. First, second, right? That tells me that these are important points. And I can show you, I've even sort of annotated down here a little bit. Whatever. And part C, the other reason why your author says that similarity is an important factor in initial attraction anyway, is that if you're like me, I assume you're going to like me. And if I think you're going to like me and be nice to me, well, then I'll like you and be nice to you. And so the book says this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fulfilling, I'm spelling it wrong, whatever. Prophecy, where I expect to like you. Okay, so now it's on you. You're going to have to do this for the rest of this section, right? You get the idea. We have A was appearance, B was similarity. So if you're guessing that C is complementarity, you're on it. And then D will be rewards and so forth as you work through the chapter. So basically what we're doing is we're kind of breaking it down section by section, and we're trying to pull out what's most important from each section. Not rocket science, but it's important to remember that outlining and mapping, that I'm going to show you now, is an organizational strategy. So you've got to make sure that your organization makes sense. Okay? It doesn't do to just list all these ideas. That's not organizing them. Even if you want to write all your ideas down on note cards and then come back later and kind of reorganize them, that's probably a better way to do it than just listing ideas. So make sure you indent to keep everything well organized. Now I'm going to show you mapping real quick. I didn't mean for this video to go on for quite so long, but I want to make sure you know how it works. So mapping is essentially the same idea. We're organizing information, only instead of going like from the top of the page down the page and indenting as we go, it's more of it's called a graphic organizer. It's a more visual way of showing how the different ideas relate to each other. To be honest with you, I think that it's a much better way of organizing information. It does a better job of explaining or showing the relationships between the ideas. However, for me, I just have to accept this about myself. I'm kind of a linear thinker. So for me, outlining is how I do stuff. What I don't like about outlining is that it's sort of, because some ideas come first, like A comes before B, it leaves the impression that what comes first on the page is more important, and that's not true at all. Since with graphic organizing, we just kind of put stuff, we gotta organize it, but we put stuff kind of all over the place, there isn't this top-down implication that some ideas are more important, so I think it's probably better. You do what works for you. I encourage you to try them both out, especially if you say, I'm an outliner. Well, then I encourage you to try the mapping. You may find that that's a great thing for you that you've never made use of before. And if you're a mapper, I don't want to discourage you, but give outlining a shot. The downside to mapping, well, we'll see this in a second. The same idea applies. So here we have our main point here, our Roman numeral 1, main idea number 1, why we form relationships. So for mapping, you can kind of put it anywhere. I'm going to put it on what I consider the middle of the page. We're just going to sort of look over here, okay? I hope you're able to see that. And typically, we'll circle it, or we'll do a little box around it or something like that. You actually have this on Microsoft Word. You're able to do these kind of outlines. I think they're a little clumsy. These are a little bit easier. All right, so let's see. That's our main idea. Well, there's various reasons, and as we look at just the table of contents, we can see that there's 7 of them listed, right? Appearance, similarity, complementarity, rewards, competency, proximity, and disclosure. So our first one is appearance. And what was important about appearance? Well, the same stuff we wrote over here. Appearance is the primary basis for speed daters. We also said that appearance is related to your first impression. That the first impression you have of somebody counts a lot when it comes to whether or not you consider them, whether or not you decide you want to form a relationship with them. You know, like that first impression rose on The Bachelor. You know, it's a very important rose, as you know. What else did we say about appearance? Pleasing personalities over time, people with pleasing personalities are rated as more attractive. Pleasant personality. And you know, if they had more to say about the first impression, we'd add more little things, right? This is sort of the equivalent of our 1, 2, 3. And if we had A, B's, and C's, we could branch off of them too. And then last but not least, as the relationship progresses, physical attractiveness is less important. Whatever, you know what I'm saying. I think you should do a better job. I don't want to have to repeat everything word for word, but I said physical is less important later. That doesn't mean when you're older. That means as a relationship progresses. Whatever. What's the next? The next reason. We're done with appearance. The next one is similarity. It's important at first. And then the author goes on to talk at length for about why that might be important. And so we have, it's validating, it's predictable, and the old, I expect to like them. The old self-fulfilling prophecy. So, same information, right? Only it's organized graphically. For me, sometimes when I look at a page that's been mapped, even a really good map, you look at it and it's like, man, there's just stuff all over the place. And so it looks like just a mishmash, just like you vomited a bunch of ideas onto the page. But if you take the time to go through it from the main idea out one at a time, you can follow the train of thought and see which ideas support and develop the other ideas. Outlining, mapping, two ways of doing the same thing. Two ways of organizing information to show how ideas develop and support the bigger ideas, right? And so you can see we kind of get more and more specific as we get into these level of details. These details explain similarity, which is part of an answer to why we form relationships, right? So that's how we do outlining and mapping. Do your best. I encourage you to go through it, say, one minor heading at a time. Some of those minor headings will still have further minor headings. That's okay. That just helps you know how you're supposed to organize these outlines or these maps. Whether you do a map, whether you do an outline, completely up to you. You could do both, right? There's 3 sections here, whatever. You can do 2 of them with an outline, 1 of them with a map. However you do it is up to you. But this is what we're working on this week while you're trying to stay well and not touch your face at home, I hope, not out of spring break like some people are doing. You're going to do it with chapter 9 from your communication book, and I'll give you something else to work on next week. You can see the stuff in Blackboard is more or less open. I think that there's one that I don't have a worksheet for you yet, but you're welcome to go ahead and get started on that. We're all doing this, working through this together, and I will do my best. If you run into trouble, please send me an email as soon as you can. Be careful to get my correct email address, but I will try to be really careful about checking that frequently. And meanwhile, hang in there, do your best. Does this need a strategy reflection? Of course this needs a strategy reflection. So you'll be turning this in along with your strategy reflections. Okay, if you want to type it and send it as an attachment, that's probably the easiest thing to do. I'm going to put a place in Blackboard for you to submit assignments. I prefer you don't email them to me. I prefer you use that thing in Blackboard. If you need to write it out by hand and take pictures, take good pictures. Just make sure that they're all perfectly legible and I can read what's on them, okay? All right, stay well, take care of yourself, hang in there, try not to go too bonkers, and I would say I'll see you soon, but I have no idea if I'll see you at all. But at least you'll see me. You'll get to see me on video, and if you'd like to post some of your own videos, that sounds like a blast. I think you should do it. Anyway, until then, I will see you later. Bye-bye.